Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar. So I'm Sam Marshall. I'm the owner of ClearBox Consulting. We're based in the UK and the Republic of Ireland. And we focus on the business side of intranets and digital workplaces. Since 2006, we've been advising companies large and small, from tiny charities all the way through to multinationals. And I'm delighted to have been asked by LiveTiles to be a guest on this webinar and to be joining Dan Thomsen. Hello, Dan.
Hi, hello everybody. My name is Dan Thomsen. I'm a senior vice president. I work with a lot of global companies and have been working with digital workplace, document management portals since 2003 for a lot of companies, all over the world, small companies, big companies, public sector, private sector also. And my role in LiveTiles now is actually on more of the business development sales side. And I always say, even though I have a sales function, I don't see myself as a sales guy because nobody trusts the sales guys. No, it's I know I like working with this field and engage with customers on all kinds of projects in the digital workplace space. So thanks very much.
Well worth talking to, even though you're a sales guy. We'll forgive you, Dan, don't we?
Yeah.
So on the agenda today, we're going to be going through 5 essentials for digital workplace transformation. And these 5 essentials are taken from a blog post that LiveTiles did based on one of Dan's recent talks. And you can see the URL on the bottom right there. So we'll be talking about the basics, design, IT and finance, process simplification, segmenting the workforce, and bots. So the format of this webinar is a little bit different. It's going to be quite conversational, and we'd be very happy if you listening in join the conversation as well through the Q&A panel. So if at any point you want to type something in there, we'll try and respond and work that into the conversation too. So let's start with the basics. Dan, tell us what you meant by the basics in your blog post.
Yeah, I mean, the basics is there's all of the companies we talk to and all of the different types of organizations we talk to are facing some of the basic challenges. It's information overload, but it's actually also application overload. And it's also, and you can say there's a number of different stakeholders in it. So there's the employees, and then there's the corporate comms and IT that try to build or get a good digital workplace solution. So if we look at the employees, it's information overload. Search is hard to do. They don't think that the internet provides a lot of, automation and enough tools for them in a fastly changing environment.
So
and then you have the other.
Explain this. Sorry to jump in, Dan, already. The slide that you're looking at. So these are themes that came from a meta-analysis that we did of all the internal surveys we've done for clients over the years. So we collated 8,000 responses. It was a sample from companies that represents about 400,000 employees. And I think you and I would both agree that one of the striking things is that you just hear the same patterns again and again about what in terms of the basics, people are feeling frustrated by.
Yeah.
Paradoxically, people say, I get told too much, but also people don't tell me what's happening. And it's like, there's a fire hose switched on, but it's always like it's the wrong fire hose. And we're going to talk about personalization, aren't we? Because that kind of global local balance is something that comes up a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But it's what I find striking is that even though there's a wide range of different types of organizations, you would say there might be retail, government sector, and so on. The basics are almost always the same for all these organizations. So there's a lot of generic trends I see out there, or generic challenges they're all facing. And it's I think in a lot of other areas, maybe it's far more vertical problems, but here it's actually generic problems across the board, whether you're one type of company, whether you're another one. And then there's also a kind of a trend towards more and more people are not that they have to be, but on the Microsoft platform. So on SharePoint, on-prem or Office 365. So we're talking to a lot of clients, same problems, but also same IT platform. And the good thing about this is, of course, that you can then learn something from it. Then there are some best practices, some things you can actually do to address all these different challenges they're all facing in the different companies.
Yeah, and I think the one about all these choices and overload is a good one. But before we just move off this slide, I also wanted to highlight the bottom right one. It ain't pretty, because I guess traditionally we've always downplayed the role of aesthetics in terms of an internal tool. But I hear it so often from employees that they just say, you know, what we have, the tools are like, I'm still using Windows 98. Or the internet is like a website that could have been part of AOL. And it really does seem to matter to them that it feels modern and appealing, and maybe almost a sense that the company cares about this stuff and showing they care about it by keeping it up to date. Is that something that you hear quite often, Dan?
Yes, I mean, that's a really good point, because why doesn't the internet have to be boring? And I actually like this. Richard Branson, I just read a quote from him the other day, said that employees are actually often more important than your customers. And you look at companies' websites, and they're trying to make them as pretty as possible. And then you look on the internet, and to some extent they look more like a newspaper. And you actually want to engage users. And design is a key factor for engagement. Anybody knows that. That's why, the iPhone revolutionized the market, because it's easy to use, it's pretty, it's slick. So we see that as a critical point for a good engagement in an intranet, that design is relevant, cool, slick, easy to understand, good UX.
Yeah. So sorry, I'll cut you off. Tell us about your too many choices theme.
Yes, let me just go to the next one here. Good. So the challenge, hang on, oh, sorry.
I like that slide, don't lose that.
Yeah. So the challenge we're seeing is that there's actually too many choices in a lot of different areas, and we see this across the board. So first, you basically go in all directions on this one, but it's the same theme. There's too much information. There's too much information for the users, like you said, with the fire hose. How do they find the right information? The other one is that there's also too many applications, so to speak. And if you look at Microsoft, they have more and more overlapping applications. I think right now there's 17 or 18 different places you can share a document, and there's 9 places you can do a task. So there's many, not only many applications and too many choices, but inside those applications, you also have too many choices, and they're overlapping. So what tool do you use for what action, so to speak? And that's a problem for the employees. So should I share a document on way 13 or way 16 or way 2? And where should I put my task so my colleague will actually find this task again? And that is a challenge we see across the board. And to some extent, it got worse over time. It didn't get less over time. And the benefits of moving to the cloud is, of course, a lot of the infrastructure is easier, and you get more functionalities. But cloud also means you get more and more services. And to even add to this complexity is not only do you have more information, more applications, and more options, they shift out faster as well. And there's constantly new applications brought to the stack. And Microsoft, I wouldn't say it's a sinner, but Microsoft does the same. So if we look back in history, then maybe 5 years ago, then the mantra in digital workplace solutions, Intranet's called back then, was to create a portal that was the source of everything. So you try to integrate everything into that portal. But that has shifted radically now.
One-stop shop. And I used to say that all the time. We want to create a one-stop shop.
Yeah. You used to say that. And I just want to say to the participants on this webinar, please use this opportunity. And Sam and I, we live and breathe digital workplace solutions for many years. So if you have questions, please pop them also, because you for free now have 2 specialists. That's all they do. And Sam and I combined, we've done hundreds of digital workplace projects, commercial over. Good. I'm just saying, use this opportunity. Good. So Microsoft has fragmented this world. And what does that mean? In reality, it means that we went from one intranet, so to speak, to all these different applications. And that's actually a challenge. So a lot of different places you can share a document, a lot of places you have information, a lot of places you have tasks. And this is the changing world for the employees, and somehow they get lost. And the challenge also is that this is how it looks today. I bet you half a year from now, Microsoft has added 2 new things to it. And then they will keep something there that actually is being replaced by another tool, but the old tool is still there, and you might use the old tool. So we have Office 365 Video, but now they have Stream also. And some use Office 365 Video, some use Stream. And it's complicated. And even professionals, that monitor what's going on, like Sam and I, have to keep up to be aware of Microsoft, what they're releasing and posting. And this is just Microsoft. Then there's a lot of other tools also. So it has dramatically changed the complexity of it. And this is, if we talk about it just from the, from the end user perspective. If we then flip over and talk about from the organizational point of view, like let's say the corporate comms and the IT side of it, how do you maintain, how do you manage this? So the problem is, so if people share a contract on OneDrive and they leave the company, the contract is gone. It's not gone, but it's locked away, and you didn't know it was there, so you actually can't have a hard time unlocking it again. It just disappears. So what you want as an organization is to have some sort of rules around this or governance. But it's hard to keep governance if there's so many different choices and options, because you can't enforce anything in OneDrive or can't enforce anything in Stream because Microsoft completely controls that interface.
So playing devil's advocate a bit,
so there's,
sometimes people say, but okay, you've got, what is it, about 20 applications here, but in our consumer world, the app stores have millions and millions of applications now. And people cope, you know, you want a task manager, you maybe download 3 or 4, you play with it and you decide. And that's what we're used to as consumers now, being quite sophisticated in making choices. So why is it such a big issue in a digital workplace that 20 feels overwhelming?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's not because we can't cope with the sheer number of apps, so to speak, but the challenge here is if you on your iPhone, you basically, you have, you don't have to cooperate with 500 other people. You have your own music service, you have all of that. So it's more centers about satisfying your needs, but it's in a corporation, you have to work with the people, let's say your team in another city, international companies and so on. And therefore you won't meet each other in the app world unless you actually use the same app. So I might share one document, OneDrive with you, and another document I would put into SharePoint, another one I'll put into Yammer, another one I'll put into Teams. We'll do it over OneNote, or we'll actually work collaborative in PowerPoint. If I have 20 options for each thing, then I can't check 20 things all the time, which channel you're talking to me about. And I think that's even a problem for on a personal level with WhatsApp, Messenger, Hi Chat. Yeah. So I texted you yesterday, yes, but on which platform did you do that? And in corporations, you need to optimize it. So find best of breed, best tools, and then do it in a proper way. Not just because you can do it in 16 ways, then you should do it in 16 ways.
Yeah, great. Dan, shall we move on to the poll? Let's ask people what they think. So we've got a poll question here. What do you do to help people know what to use when? And you should see 5 options pop up there if you just want to take a second to vote. So we've got in-person training, e-learning, champions network, hiding some features, or nothing at all. So the challenge is how do you help people at work understand which tool to use for a given circumstance? Just give you a second or 2 more to vote. Wedge, let us know when we've got some votes in and we'll have a look at the results.
Oh yes, 60% of people have voted, so 10 more seconds.
All right. We'll call that democracy.
And the results should be showing for all of you now.
Can't see anything come through yet. Ah, there we go. Well, Champions Network coming through 47% of all cases. So that's really high. Dan, anything surprise you in those results?
No, that's how life works. If I want to buy a new car, I talk to my friends. That's a Champions Network. So trust is a big thing. So yeah, no. What's your thoughts on it, Sam?
I'm surprised that hiding some features is so low. Because often the organizations that I talk to, they say, oh yeah, we haven't switched on Teams yet because we're a little bit nervous about the governance of it, for example. And I think that's absolutely the right thing, that the organization as a whole needs to say, let's make some choices about which part of this tool set we've got that we actually want to use, rather than just switching it all on because you can. If you don't, that kind of leads to that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Let's move on to design, Dan. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about design and your blog post about that.
Yes, hang on. Sorry, I clicked on this. So the whole point about design is to have some engaging design. It's both on the UX side, but actually also sexy design. Did I put some slides in on Nike in this deck, Sam?
You did, yes.
Hang on, could you flip to them?
Yeah, just give me a second. I'll move over there.
So we worked with Nike. LiveTiles worked with Nike, and Nike, you know, is everybody knows Nikes, but actually, their whole organization is about this, cool, branded, everything, and in the same way they wanted their intranet to look cool and branded, exactly the same way. So what we did for Nike is actually this looks more like a website that actually looks like an intranet, but it's actually building a lot of video graphics, a lot of engaging stuff. So it doesn't matter whether they're external or internal, it's very cool and very engaging. And we see that a lot more. The challenge, of course, always is you shouldn't just make it pretty. It still has to be effective and everything. But that's what we did with Nike, trying to make it very engaging and very not classical newspaper digital workplace / in something very different. So that's one of my key areas, and it shouldn't. In my world, it's a tool, but it has to be a cool tool, and that's very important for successful intranets. Otherwise, people won't use it very much.
Yeah. And I'm just picking up on a comment from Reg Tate. Thank you, Reg, for putting something in the Q&A panel. So he's saying, how important do you think software speed is to typical users? And enterprise software seems slow and cumbersome to use, even for simple tasks. So I think it's about the time it takes to get simple things done. I might just show you an example from US financial company Wells Fargo, that they put a lot of thought into simplifying the tasks of employees. And they use a microservices architecture, which is basically saying, how do we address individual bits of applications so you can do small tasks in an aggregated way? So rather than saying anything to do with HR, you need to log into this great big HR system, you might just want to book a day off and interact only with the absence booking element. Yeah. So in this screenshot, what you can see is the home page. On the right-hand side, there's a bar with notifications. And when you click on that bar, it shows you all notifications from across lots of different systems. So what you're seeing is like the time tracker, but also pending requests from different systems in one go. And I think what Wells Fargo have understood is that actually employees want to get all this kind of administrative stuff out of the way quickly so they can get on with what they see as being work. And I'd love to see more digital workplaces kind of latch onto that. How do we prioritize letting employees do things in a minimum amount of time rather than, say, overloading them with information extraneously as they're going through other things?
Yeah. If I might add to that, because something that Wells Fargo has done here, Sam, is actually what we've done also from LiveTiles. So if you flip back to the beginning of my Power Panel. Yeah. So going back to this information overload, so to speak. So what we've tried to say is how can we actually address this on the design side, you could say also on the UX side of it. So if there's more and more applications and they can do different things, it becomes actually somewhat overwhelming. So what we've done is actually we built an application that sits inside other applications. So it follows you around. So it's the same application that will follow you around wherever you are with the same tool set, so to speak. So what it can do is it can actually bring information from anywhere. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Teams, whether you're in Planner, whether you're in Stream, whether you're on wherever you are, it will bring you all the information to you in whichever application you are. So it's a different concept than the old internet where you put everything in a portal. It's actually it will follow you around. We call it a power panel. It's personalized, will bring you information and everything, but it will bring you that. But not only that, it in addition to that will actually also, you can create anything from anywhere. So you could also be in Teams and create a news article that will go on the internet, or you can be in SharePoint and you could create a Teams site or a policy or anything. So it doesn't matter where you are, not only will you get information, but you can also create something regardless of where you are. And that's the way we solve this, and we see a lot of companies adopting this and liking this really, because it's a separate layer, you can actually also control it. So you solve the governance area of it. So that means the organization can say, okay, for policies, we use this tool. For news, we use that tool. For collaboration, if it's a project room, we use that. If it's a committee, we use that tool. And you can control that because you can control the power panel. So it could look like this. This is how it looks inside SharePoint, but it's on the left-hand side of Power Panel here, and you have these different panes. And for example, if I clicked on the plus, it will pop up with the actions that are relevant for me. So it's actually personalized actions. Create news, then takes you to the right location in SharePoint and opens up a template, different templates, and you can then create a news item. If it was a workspace, it can then take you to Teams, SharePoint sites, Yammer, whatever you want to use for that. But it's a controlled process, and we can also intercept and ask for some properties, metadata, retention cycles, and so on, can then be set based on the metadata. So it's a tool that follows you around that you can also, from an organizational side, get governance on it. So instead of, there might be 20 places you can create a news post, you don't want users to do that. You want actually single click, so they just open it up and it shows them what they can do. And then they have the links, it's all personalized, targeted, and so on. It shows them the links they have in different categories of links. It can bring alerts from a lot of different systems. And bearing in mind, this Power Panel also, let's say, for example, sits in Teams. So now in Teams, you have your whole intranet also. So you don't have to be in SharePoint to have your intranet. You can actually be in Teams on the whole intranet also. So it comes in it's coming out in a mobile app, and we also just launched it for Teams. So on the design side, we've tried to design it differently. So it's an app within all the other different apps.
And maybe this is a good point to pick up on a comment from Joe Turrent. Thank you, Joe. So he's saying, think about your work with organizations to move from a one-stop shop, that phrase, to a more focused intranet. That knowing different things will work for different orgs. Can you share any examples of specific purposes that have worked well? And I think what you're sharing with us, Dan, is this idea that actually the internet is just one point of consumption, and that Teams and indeed mobile apps and so on can also be different ways of getting at the same information. The idea that you've got to drag everybody to the internet as a web-based way in has kind of had its day to me. And it's quite right sometimes if intranets take on a more modest role, which might be for news and reference information.
Yeah.
And we use other tools for other workloads.
Yeah. I mean, the good point from Joe Torrent here is that the reason why you use specific apps instead of one app to solve them all is the more functional apps are actually better. Planner is a fantastic tool to get an overview of different tasks and so on. And Teams is a really, really good collaboration space. But so that's why you would opt for a point-specific application, but you don't want people to get lost in there, and that's the other thing, and that's why you need to tie it all together. And Microsoft doesn't do it, so to speak, and that's why we built the Power Panel for that, to actually tie it together across the board.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the third topic, which is about IT and finance. And for this, I pulled out quite an interesting study that was done, I think, about 2 months ago. Which was a survey by the Economist Intelligence Unit of about 1,300 leaders saying who's in charge of the employee experience. So it's not specifically digital workplace, but a lot of it was around the digital employee experience. And you can decode all these C acronyms on the left. You've got Chief HR Officer at the top, Chief Executive, Chief Operations, Chief Finance. So one thing that struck me here is that CIO isn't that high up the rankings here, but also that most people are saying, look, it's a shared responsibility. It isn't just one person in the C-suite who can drive all of this. And I think that's quite right, that we at ClearBox would always encourage it to be a coalition of maybe IT, chief operations, and chief HR officer or communications, if they've got a seat at the table as well, driving this. But you also think, Dan, that the finance side of it's important. Tell us a bit more about the finance side.
And it's because I work. So when organizations want a new intranet or digital workplace solution, so they will go talk to different vendors, and that's where we come into the game. So LiveTiles will then engage with a discussion with the customer, and what happens then is a long procurement process, whether they choose us or another offering. And it's that procurement process is really extremely long. So we see a lot of projects actually being extended by months and months and months just for the procurement process, which I think is bad. And then I recall I was at a conference one, and there was a Microsoft CFO talking, and he said, so I write the checks. So any major purchase thing has to go through me. But the funny thing is I'm never involved in the purchase process. Nobody calls me up and invites me for a meeting. And so I'm actually the guy who can make a decision fastest in this company because I have the power to spend money. Everybody else has to go through committees and getting approval. So he said, for any major thing, actually involve the CFO early in the game. So that's my advice to organizations that want to procure some different components of a digital workplace solution. Involve the CFO earlier than actually later, or you will end up spending a lot of time in procurement committee processes, so to speak.
And often on our side, when we're writing a strategy, we say to stakeholders early on, but what's it actually going to take to get this signed off? Because in some organizations, it really is the sense that, look, we just know this is a cost of doing business. It's really important to us, for example, to improve the employee experience because it's scored not very well in our recent satisfaction survey. So long as you can plausibly say it will have an impact, we're good with it. Whereas other organizations will say, we're very cost driven and we definitely want to see a return on investment for this and a detailed cost breakdown. And knowing that early on can really influence how you gather data and how you kind of shape the thing that you submit for approval to the board. Yeah. But there's a bit of a dilemma that we come across in this, which is to do with waterfall versus agile. So I'm sure most people are familiar with the classic model, which is that you spend months and months gathering requirements and then months and months designing a system, and then, as you say, another 6 months going through procurement. And then finally, maybe 15 months after you ask people what you wanted, you go, ta-da, we've launched the intranet. And everybody says, gosh, I'd actually forgotten I'd asked for that in the first place. And then everybody packs up the tools and goes home, and post-launch, nothing happens. And most people would agree that this isn't a great model because often you see intranets that are launched and on day one, they're fresh and they're great. And 3 years later, they've all kind of deteriorated. It's like, you know, you've opened a canteen and then you've never actually cleaned the kitchen. So what we normally advocate is moving towards a more agile approach. It's not proper agile in the sense of Scrum where you've got very quick sprints, but more saying just get the minimum foundation in place as quickly as you can. And then in a series of waves, start piloting and then scaling up, and then pilot and scale up in the next wave as well. And that allows you to keep things fresh and also take on board new requirements from the business as they come live. But the big financial challenge with this is that if you really say it's genuinely agile, there's no end point. So often we describe this and senior people say, yes, we love it, we're on board with it. How much will it cost in the end? And we have to say, well, there is no end point. The whole point is that every wave is pushing it forward all the time. And then you get that, oh, so we signing a blank check here? I know it's not a blank check, but it is an ongoing commitment to support it. I mean, have you had any success in that kind of conversation, Dan, about how do you position this to the CFO in the ways that he's comfortable with or she's comfortable with?
Yes and no. So the challenge thing is always price, and the price, people want a fixed price for something they don't know what it is, so to speak. So it's like you want a new house, how much does it cost? Well, it depends on how many bathrooms you have, etc. So so what we see a trend towards more is a lot like exactly like you say here, quicker projects, but it's more basically I would say time boxed. So they set aside a certain amount of money for a wave. And then it's agile, so we have a backlog of things we want to do, and then it's fine. You go into the shop and you have, I don't know, £100, and that's what you spend, or $100 from the backlog. And then they can decide for the next one also. So the way you control the money side of it is how much you set aside for a wave, and that's a fixed sum of money. And then you work down the backlog. What you don't get out of it is what exactly did we get, but you actually are the one prioritizing. Let's say you have 25 things you would like, and you only get, I don't know, 22 of them, but you prioritize with 22 for that set of money. So that's the way around this. CFOs and procurement people hate it if you don't have a fixed price and a fixed outcome. but it's more, this is not, it's harder to do a very specific requirement saying this is exactly what you want to do. So our best successes is actually you time box it, or you say this is amount of money and then do agile on that. And then quicker projects versus longer projects. So we just did the rollout of a global company, 140,000 people. And this was actually from signing the contracts and they went live was 3 to 4 months. And they managed to do that because they cut the scope, but it meant they were a huge success in the organization because from when they started, it was very fast. And then they do it in waves afterwards. And money-wise, it was actually cheaper because planning a project for a year and procurement processes also has a cost, both an opportunity cost, you lose some money by not doing anything, and then just a whole internal project cost. So we see quicker projects, shorter time frames, and then do agile with a set of money for each wave you actually do as the most successful part of it.
Yes, yeah, and you'll see on this slide, I've talked about getting to value in 6 months here versus maybe you don't get any value back until 15 months on. I think that is quite a strong influence in many cases.
And then one last thing I'd like to add also is with the shifting technology we're working in right now with Microsoft, if you had a project that took 1 year, 1.5 years, the platform you were doing something on has changed. So if your decisions are a year down the road, the ground has shifted underneath you. So you have to do it shorter also. You can't just, we don't know what's coming out with the next 1 year from Microsoft. So you can't plan that far ahead also.
Yeah.
That also means you should do it shorter.
Let's bring in the comment from Ray Harrison then, because he's saying with many cloud-based offerings, there's concern about security and intellectual property of sensitive company information. Yes. And that can delay the rollout of collaboration tools because, you know, you have to do due diligence on them and so on.
Yeah. And it's the easy answer is power panel, Ray, buy power panel, because you have two options. But you have two options.
Well, actually, coming that you're not a sales guy at the start.
No, you're right. No, but you have two options. You can control everything, and then you think you controlled it, but then you have shadow IT. Then people, if it's so cumbersome to share something, then you end up people using alternative tools where you have no control whatsoever. That's your one challenge. If it's too rigid, you end up with an alternative that is far worse. So what you need to do is what you want them to do. And the problem we see in a lot of organizations, if you don't have an automated tool that knows who you are and shows the tools you should use automatically, and there's some process built into it, so you have governance on it, then you'll just end up in a lot of problems. What normal people do is they write 16 pages governance policies of what you should do that nobody read in the organization. So build automated tools that are easy to find. I need to build a contract or create a contract. I need to do that. And then there's a flow process around that does it and automates the governance as part of that. That's how you can solve it. And therefore you need some tools to do it. It doesn't have to be PowerPoint, it could be anything. But you need to automate things and people then speed up their work, they're happier, and the side effect is governance.
I guess what I'd add to that though is that this is to me why even when you work in an agile mode, it's important to have that vision about where you're going, because that's where you can say, what's the right product to fit this need that we have and stick with it. Sometimes what delays it is people have started using Trello, for example, or Box, and therefore we need to assess whether it's safe or not. And that's when you're in reactive mode. Whereas if you're in proactive mode, you can say, within our collaboration landscape, we're definitely going to need something to fill this space. So let's start doing that testing as soon as we can. And that's why on the slide you're looking at, I'm talking about doing pilots first and doing that kind of evaluation. And then once you're satisfied, rolling it out. The other thing I would say though, Ray, is I know we said about things looking dated when they're 3 years old, but in general, in the workplace, people don't always necessarily want cutting edge, because you'll have the 10% of early adopters who are the first thing on whatever the latest social media platform is, for example. But most of the organization will come to it as consumers in their lives quite late to things, and therefore it's okay if they're quite late within the workplace as well. Let's move on to this one then, as I see you are, Dan, about process simplification. because you started to talk about governance. You there, Dan? I think we might have lost Dan. And I've got a ghost in the machine. Well, while we get Dan back, let me tell you a little bit about my take on this. So the thing about process simplification is that it's not just about digitizing a process. It's also about saying, is there an opportunity to make things easier to do? And the example I often pick is in the consumer world around train delays. So in the UK, I'm sure it never happens in your country, but in the UK, our trains sometimes run late. And when they do, we had this compensation scheme called delay repay. And traditionally what happens is you get off your train, you're really grumpy because you're late. Excuse me, I don't know why it's clicking ahead, because you're really late. And you get a form to fill in, and then you post off your ticket, and maybe a month later, you get a check in the post. It's very paper-based. And some of the train companies, they at least made this more digital by putting it into the website. So the website
I'm back. Sorry.
All right, then.
Sorry.
What Virgin Trains did, though, is say, well, no, we've got a much better opportunity here. If you book your train through the Virgin website, we know your credit card details. We know whether it was on time or not because it was our train. And therefore, we can automatically issue this refund through your credit card within 24 hours, and we'll send you an email to say you've done it. So you don't have to lift a finger. And I think what's great about that is that they've actually thought through not just how we digitize the process, but how do we actually improve the customer experience by actually showing that we care that the train was late and putting things right again. And if we look at a lot of the employee experience within the workplace, the same thinking needs to apply. So I won't take you through all of this, but here's an example of someone trying to book a training course. And if you look at the frowny smiley faces, what tends to go wrong is when they're trying to do things across systems. So they do a search on the intranet and it doesn't find the right information because it actually lives within a separate learning management system that hasn't been indexed. And when they try and book on a course, it asks for a cost code, but it's not tied to the finance system, so it doesn't put it through. Or it asks for an approver, but it's not actively, not well tied into Active Directory, and therefore you see the wrong list of managers from the pick list. So at that point, people get really frustrated, and that's when they jump out into very unstructured things like a social network, such as Yammer, and say, can anybody help? I'm stuck. But it's not just that 15 minutes or so of time that's wasted, but actually the way that it makes the employee feel as well, that these irritating little processes leave you feeling a bit deflated about your day. Dan, I just took control off you there, so because it was looking around, but let me bring you back in. So,
so
what's your take on this?
Yes, automate. Sorry, this is my slide here with the bomb. You need to automate the boring stuff, and also both the processes that I mentioned before, like Sam showed there. So anything you can automate takes the pain out of it, and this is very crucial. A lot of large intranets die because the content is not managed and all of that. So what we've worked a lot on is actually automating all the boring stuff out of it. So this is an example what we've done to solve this. So it's governance and compliance. I normally say that that's actually a ticking time box. Hang on. So, sorry, go back again. So what we've done, if somebody creates, to solve this, so what we've done with the simplicity of, if somebody creates a new page in SharePoint, we in the background automatically log that person has actually created that page. And then the company can decide 12 months from now or 18 months from now, it should be reviewed again. And then we will just automatically send out an email to the editors that they need to review it again. They have an editor's dashboard. There's a corporate dashboards of all the pages that have been reviewed. So without having kind of all the boring stuff, we do it, we notify, we bring automatic dashboards that actually do that. And then the page can also say that it's past revision dates, like the milk popping up, don't drink me, I'm too old. So to make it easier for the end users, that it's past revision date. So we try to take the boring stuff out, and this makes it your content alive. And if your content is not alive, people don't trust your actual intranet. Sorry. Good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Next point was about segmenting the workforce. And this is something that I've been thinking deeply about for many, many years. And I guess my take on it is that if you put the employee at the middle of their world and think about their information needs, it tends to fall into a number of buckets. So they wanted to know about the company. Often they've got a role that might be about a particular country or market. They want to know about the physical office building. They need to know about the function they work in. Often that goes with a division as well. So, you know, it might be a particular product division. And then there'll be more collaborative things which are ad hoc or change over time, like projects and communities that they belong to. So if you take a specific example, let's imagine that this is Anna and her function is finance for the aerospace division, and she's based in Stockholm, serving the Nordic region. You could view all these boxes as basically a big set of filters on all the possible information that Anna could see, and immediately shrink it down to things that are matches for these particular dimensions. So this is almost like saying, of the things that are pushed top down, what should we bubble up to the top? And then there'll be some things which are very specific to Anna and her permissions, such as the project that only she can get into, and communities that she opts to join in. And if you get this right, it greatly simplifies their experience of the digital workplace, because you can start to say, okay, Anna, when you come to, say, an intranet, here's the things that we know are most important to you. We'll show you finance, but we won't show you legal information because finance is where you work. The gotcha for that, though, is that you need really good people data. And often there's a catch-22 here that people or organizations don't have good people data because no one fills in their profile, and no one bothers to fill in the profile because they say, well, what's the benefit for me? You need to get into that virtuous circle of saying, well, Anna, if you tell us a little bit about yourself, we can create a much simpler environment for you. And Dan, I guess you got something to say on profiles as well.
Yes, and that's what we see. So if you don't know Anna, you can't target Anna. So the whole point is what Sam just described there is crucial. You want to bring the right tools, right information, so on to the right people. But what we see out there is I think there's some statistics on it. 80% of the organizations don't have the right user profile data. So if you don't have the right user profile data, you can't target them, you can't help them, you can't personalize, you can't do all the things you want to do from your users. So the way we try to solve this is that what if you had a small tool that automatically made sure everybody had the user profile data they needed? And that is what Hyperfish from LiveTiles does. So it will actually, and the left side here is just some settings. You can be funny, relaxed, serious, and how often you need to reply them. So if I'm missing 2 user profile data fields, then Hyperfish will just go out, send me an email, hi Dan, I need your phone number or that. Is that okay? You click yes, and then it automatically updates. And after I've filled out my 2 fields, it will stay quiet until somebody might decide I need to fill out another field, and then it will pop up again. So it's an engine that small program that automatically fills out the user profile data by contacting the users with the user profile data they need. And that drives all the rest of the organization. So it's a very small thing, but if you don't have it, you are actually always, to some extent, handicapped on what you can target the user with. And that's a big problem in the end.
Yeah.
So again, it automates something instead of making it complicated, and it's in the governance slide or page 16 that you have to fill it out.
Yeah, great. So we've got another little poll just to, I'm looking at this phrasing saying, what ways do you target users, and thinking actually maybe that sounds like very kind of corporate terminology. So what we're interested in, what are the ways you do to create a personalized digital workplace? So you can see a multiple choice one popped up this time. So are you able to help people see the right things by geography, department, work level, by which means maybe you just want things that only managers can see or first line workers can see, by role, so that might be, for example, field workers, or are you unable to target? So just give people a few seconds to think through. As I say, this one's multiple choice if you want to pick more than one.
Yep, 50% of people have voted, so 5 more seconds, please.
My head have got a little leg timer counting down.
Yeah.
Okay, and then in a second or two, we should see the results. There we go. So 26% geography, 39% by department, 13% unable to target. So I think that's really good, actually. I would have thought more people said that they can't target at all. So it's great there's some geographical and departmental ones. Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
You're not impressed.
No, I'm not. The thing is, department is kind of, I sit in sales. Well, everybody in that room sits in sales, or I sit in HR and everybody sits in. That's kind of geography is a bigger bucket than department. So but it's still not, it's not precise at all. So what are you working with? What are your key tasks? What your role is? Far more. If it's not precise, it's just in broad terms, and then you actually don't have efficient targeting. So I see the need for working a lot more with this, because if you're a big organization, you drown in information tools and tasks. So you need precise targeting. I know that's the level we're at, but that's not the level we should be at, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point, Dan. I'm much more depressed now after your comment. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. But there was actually, on the Q&A, there was a question here about people have a negative opinion of fulfilling personal forms or personalizing forms. Let me just answer that from Xenia. It is, do it on a professional level. It should be optional whether you like jazz, but that you're working with technologies or working with that should be part of your work and fill that out. But the personal side of it, I think that should be, but that's my take on it. That should be optional, whether people that I like to go skiing or listen to jazz. What's your take on that, Sam?
I think we should encourage people to bring their whole selves to the workplace, to steal a phrase from Wes just before we started this webinar, because the digital channel is quite diminished in terms of our understanding of our colleagues compared to the information you would get if you're in an office with them together every day and chatting to them about the weekend and just kind of gauging their mood or seeing what excites them. So if all you do is meet colleagues through virtual teams or online chat and so on, you need to supplement that a bit more by perhaps just being able to document what you like, as in what you enjoy and what motivates you and what things you may be less keen on, rather than relying on not saying anything at all and hoping that people pick it up from the tone of your email, for example. Dan Hawtrey, I guess we both know Dan.
Yeah.
Can you get too fancy with targeting, segment audiences too much using non-traditional attributes? I've worked in organizations where they've tied themselves in knots with targeting because they haven't had a clear model of who needs to know what. So I would say you can go so far with targeting, but it's always good to have a way for users to see it like a dashboard of, you're seeing these 5 things because we know this about you, or this is what we understand about you. And where possible, let them override it. So one place I worked, it kind of locked down. If you were in the London office, you would only see London information. And someone said, yeah, but I go to the Brussels office once a month. I want to see what's happening in Brussels as well. And the system just won't let me. So you can't make the system feel, it doesn't feel like the system's grabbed control too much.
Yeah, it should always be, good question, it should always be 2 things. One is, we suggest for you, this is the proper one. Then there might be some mandatory things you have to see, and that is important. But people should also be able to subscribe to different types of views. And this is very important because I might have a role, but I might have 6 different things I'm working with in that role. And the company knows 2 of them. And next week or next month, I'm going to do something new, but I actually want to get acquainted with it also. So the targeting should be both from the corporate side of it, and also should be me being able to have subscription models. I can subscribe to whatever I think is interesting and unsubscribe again. And this is very crucial. Yeah. So it should be like subscription and targeting.
Yeah, great. So the title was 5 things, and bots is the 6th thing. So we're going to be ruthless and say 90 seconds each. Dan, tell me, why do you think bots are important?
Bots is to automate. It's an interface to actually automate the ways we can ask questions and engage with different types of services and tools and users. So what we've done with LiveTiles is we've used Microsoft bot technology, and we built a model on top of it, so you can actually literally drag and drop to build bots. And bots our take on bots is that you can, the efficiency of the bot is the logic that has been used to program the bot, and make it simple so people understand, okay, so this is a travel booking bot. So then you don't have to have a bot that knows everything in the world. It just needs to know travel booking. And then you can have smaller targeted bots that easily can understand what you're looking for. And again, the whole thing is self-service and automating different things. And bots have also, you can't use bots for news. Quartz did that, a news bot, and it doesn't work out. Then you need a dashboard with overview and subscriptions and stuff like that. But small targeted bots that are easy to build, easy to maintain, and easy to put logic in. And that's why we built the framework on it.
Okay. And my take on it is that I'd probably say most organizations are not too ready for bots yet. And one reason is that bots are often an interface to enterprise search. So it's like a natural language query engine. And so many organizations, going back to that very first basic slide, don't have good enterprise search. And putting a bot layer on top can just make it a little bit more tricky. So I would say, given the choice between optimizing search and investing in a bot, I get people to focus on search first of all. And I've also, if you look in this 6 success factors list, put in universal, because I think, yeah, initially when you're piloting, it makes sense to have a travel-specific bot or an HR-specific bot. But ultimately, surely we want to get to the point where the employee shouldn't have to know which bot can answer which question. For myself, with Alexa, for example, I find it really frustrating that I can't say, turn the heating on. I have to say, ask Hive to turn the heating on, because Alexa's got to pass that on to another bot. And at some point, I'm going to forget which system's doing what thing, and I'll probably go back to pressing physical buttons.